So now we're going to go over the last branch, which is the judicial branch, okay? And the way to remember that, J for judicial, J for judge, okay? So judges, judges, they're in courts, they're making decisions, right? That's basically what the judicial branch does. They interpret and review the laws. And again, there are 3 different levels, and we see courts in those 3 different levels. So at the federal level, we have the Supreme Court. At the state level, we have state courts, and at the local level, we have district courts. So again, looking at all of this, you can see federalism in action with the different levels and the separation of powers between the 3 different branches. All right, Wildcats, so now it's time for looking at some money action. Types of economies. Money, money, money. All right, there are 4 main types of economies. Traditional, command, market, and mixed. And again, I'm going to teach you some real quick and easy ways that you can remember kind of what each one has to do with. So let's look at the first one. Traditional. What's tradition mean? Tradition to me is like something that your family does or your friends do kind of always, and that's just the way it's always been done. That's pretty much exactly what a traditional economy is. An economy is set up where you do things the way they've always been done. The government really isn't involved. Families do what families have done. Predominantly, they're hunting and farming systems that are set up. So traditional economies, you're not really having to think about what you're going to do because you're just going to do what's always been done. Command economy. Command. Someone says, I command you to do this, right? They're telling you something you have to do, okay? And in command economy, the government is telling citizens what they have to do, what they need to make, how they need to make it, how much they need to make it. There's not a lot of choice. And, gonna test your mind a little bit, command economy, what type of government are you gonna see a command economy in? Probably an authoritarian, right? Because there's gonna be that total control of the government. Now another type is market. Now when I think of market, I think of a little nursery rhyme, market to buy a fat pig. Maybe you don't know that, right? But market, there's lots of shopping, right? People are buying things, okay? Market economy, consumers are dictating what businesses are going to sell. Again, the government's not saying what you need to buy. Businesses are responding to what's going to sell. They're listening to supply and demand. And the last type of government is mixed. Mixed economy is when there's some government regulation, but generally people are free to decide what they want to make and how they want to make it. A mixed economy is what we have here in the United States. All right, Wildcats, so on the HSA, you're going to see a couple of court cases. Quiz question, court cases, what branch of government are you going to see? I hope you were thinking judicial, right? J for judicial, J for judge. Now I'm going to give you again that real quick and dirty synopsis of these court cases, so when you see them on the HSA, you'll be able to think, oh right, I remember a little bit about this court case. So the first one is Marbury versus Madison. And the key thing to remember about Marbury versus Madison is that it established judicial review, meaning that the Supreme Court could look at things and determine whether or not they were constitutional. The next one to know about is McCullough versus Maryland. Again, this is about that concept of federalism, saying that we have different levels of government and that they act together, but ultimately the federal government is the level of government that's going to make the major decisions for our country. I call these the M&M cases just because they got lots of M's. But the key things to remember about them is that they're the older court cases and they set up these principles of our government. They set up judicial review, right, one of the powers that the judicial branch has, and federalism, which is a principle of American government. But now let's get into the more fun ones, in my opinion. Okay, Plessy versus Ferguson. This was a court case that established the idea that separate was equal. There was a gentleman who was on a train, who was African American, and who was asked to leave one of the train cars, and the courts ruled that the train had the right to kick him off the car. So this is essentially, time out. So Plessy versus Ferguson established segregation as a practice that could happen in our country. Now, the next court case is Brown versus Board of Education. And this actually overturned Plessy versus Ferguson because the result was that separate is not equal. There was a little girl who was African American who wanted to go to the school that was closest to her house. However, it was a white school, so she had to go drive a long distance on a bus, and her parents were not happy with that. So her parents took the school system to court, and the court sided with the Browns, and so that started the end of segregation in the United States. Now, Gideon versus Wainwright is a court case that decided that if one cannot afford a lawyer, one will be appointed to you. There was a man who was convicted of crime, and he did not have a lawyer, and he lost his case because he represented himself. He didn't have money and wasn't that well educated. So as a result, if I get locked up and I can't afford a lawyer, the court is going to appoint one to me. Another case that has to do with due process is Miranda versus Arizona. And so Miranda versus Arizona established that when you get arrested, you have to know your rights. Maybe you've seen it on TV, where they, on a court case show, they'll say like, and you have the right to remain silent, etc., etc., etc. This guy Miranda, when he was arrested, nobody told him that he had the right to remain silent. So when the police told him, you have to confess everything, he did. And he does not have to do that. The Fifth Amendment says that you do not have to self-incriminate yourself. So because of Miranda versus Arizona, now anytime anyone is arrested, you have to have your rights read to you. Otherwise, the case can get thrown out. Now, these are two ones that have to do with schools. New Jersey versus TLO is a search and seizure issue. There was a girl who was caught smoking in the bathroom, and because of that, the assistant principal wanted to look through her purse. And as he looked through her purse, he found out that she had some illegal drugs. And this court case decided that students leave some of their rights when they enter a school building. So even though the assistant principal did not have a warrant, if she's in a school and there's probable cause, an administrator can search through her things. Tinker versus Des Moines is about some students who were protesting the Vietnam War. They wore these black armbands to show that they were against it. And the school thought, since it was a time when there were some people who were for the war and some people who were against the war, that this was going to cause a riot. So they suspended the students. However, it was found that since the students were protesting peacefully and not causing a disturbance, that this was actually a form of protected free speech, because the First Amendment of the Constitution guarantees the right to freedom of speech. All right, guys and girls, it's time to show us what you know. So go ahead and knock them dead on those HSA questions.